with more on that, plus how talking points from both parties may change dealing with illegal immigration, John Gizzi, Newsmax White House correspondent and chief political columnist. John, thanks for Skyping in from the District of Columbia.
Thank you, JD. It's a pleasure to be back here, and glad to see you're back in the proverbial saddle and battling that cold.
I'm still a little frayed around the vocal cords, but we're getting it done. Now, some other things that can be frayed at times. The legislative process. President Obama asked for what, close to $4 billion? Harry Reid says give it to him. Meantime, the House yesterday, Speaker Boehner coming out saying, no, we'll go maybe $1.5 billion, but we have to have border enforcement. You've got that going. At the same time, we know members of the House and Senate pay attention to polls and different reports. The Pew Research study showing that more than 80% of who the dominant media culture calls, quote, children, in fact, are really teenagers. You've got people coming in, I believe it was in excess of 90% in 2013. This year, 84% teenagers. Does this end up being a game changer in terms of talking points and the public acknowledgement of who's really coming across the southern border?
Insufficient data at this point, JD, and let me tell you why. Just look at your calendar and you'll see that there are less than 2 weeks of work days for the Congress before it adjourns for the summer. The president will leave in the first week of August for his Martha's Vineyard vacation. Congress will be out of town. Some say the Republic is safe for the month of August. In any event, that's a very short time to shorten the gap between $4.1 billion as the president wants for this border security project and the $1.5 million that Republicans say they'll give, $1.7 in other accounts. In addition, there's the question of 40 immigration judges that'll be on the border. Republicans are a little skeptical about this. Remember, Republicans historically do not like to enlarge courts or create more judicial slots, even in times of emergencies. And then finally, there's the dispute over whether more National Guard troops should be dispatched to the border. The administration asks why, when people are just coming over and the guards there are just taking care of them and taking care of their needs. Congress sees it another way. My guess is that they'll be eyeball to eyeball, and in the next 2 weeks, neither side will blink on this.
So that means essentially it just stays in limbo right through the summer recess.
Exactly. The term in Washington, JD, and you know it well, is kicking the can. Congress will return in September, and they may do something at the time. I might add that this is a double-edged sword. Because of the disagreements, poll numbers are increasingly showing voters disappointed with Congress in general. Now, how that will translate, I'm not sure, but there's a number of primaries coming up in August around the country, and I have no doubt that the actions of Congress and the administration on the border situation will play a role in those races.
John, you mentioned a minute ago that the president is preparing for his vacation out on Martha's Vineyard. Now, he's just spent a few days out west fundraising. Is this
now?
Yeah, he's still out there fundraising for Democratic candidates. Is this going to hurt him, or can he pawn this off as something that has to be done to help his party and help his friends in the Senate and the House?
I will tell you this, JD, and I don't put this past Barack Obama. I saw him do it when it looked as though government would close when there was going to be no money to fund it at the end of 2012. When it looked like there would be a case of government workers not being paid and government functions interrupted, the president sent his family on to Hawaii, and he stayed for an extra few days until a deal could be reached. And I remember that very well. I remember his final news conference in the executive office building. So he may well just try to do this. I would say they were a lot further along on the fiscal confrontation than they are on immigration right now.
So you see him perhaps, as we saw with Obamacare when they delayed their Christmas vacation to Hawaii, as has happened again in another instance where the president sent the family on ahead and he stayed there in Washington trying to work out a deal. You still believe there's some wiggle room for that kind of gamesmanship or brinksmanship?
If the president wants to use his political capital on this particular issue, and again, let me tell you something. My fellow members of the White House Correspondents Association will tell you to a man or woman that this administration is the tightest in terms of leaks and sources. They control the flow of news that comes outside the White House. As you know, when they banned reporters and cameras, or banned cameras, reporters were allowed from the Apollo, Ben, and the Moon. They can easily deny coverage to events, sometimes, which many Americans would like to see. So I'm not exactly sure what's on the president's mind. All I can say is, as they used to say in the movie serials, stay tuned till next week.
About a minute remaining, John. One of the stories coming out of the president's Southern California swing, holding up traffic in L.A. with a motorcade. A woman in labor was stopped from crossing a street because the motorcade was coming through. Is that a human interest story that offers a metaphor for what's going on with our border situation?
Oh, I'm sure that I have a colleague who's very enterprising and creative who's going to make it one. There are always unfortunate circumstances when the president travels, no matter where he goes. And I was in New York the same day that he came up for an event. And it just becomes very difficult to move because of the protection and the security that's there and the number of cars. And some of us still have to go to work.
Yep, the commuters have trouble, and so do women in labor, apparently. So much for being a friend of labor. Hey, John Gizzi, thanks so much for your comments. We appreciate them very much. And America's Forum will continue following this timeout.